We have apologies from Robbie and Sarah. We're all the rest of us are here. I'll move they be accepted. Duncan will second that. Put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Any conflicts of interest? Appear to be none. Any corrections to the minutes? Monique.
There's a comment that Morris made which has been put under my name. So, shall I sort that later? No, finally.
Right. If you can tell Kay later where that is, we'll get that corrected.
Thank you.
Someone prepared to move the adoption of the minutes with that correction? Moved by Duncan, seconded by Jason. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Any matters arising? Appear to be none. Right, Bernard, if you'd like to come forward and sit up there, yes, we give you up to 10 minutes and you may get some questions. Bernard's going to be, Kingsbury from Cust is going to be talking about the Cust domain. It's good to have you here. Just before you speak, just like to acknowledge all the work you do in your community over a very long time. Thank you, and it's good to see your interest hasn't waned at all. So if you'd like us to press talk bit on your... That's right.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. I've been Secretary of the Cust Domain 50 years this year, so I took over from my father. And but we've got a great facility down there. It's 27 acres, and it's mainly used for camping. It's always been used for camping in the days of the old Cust Grand Prix. People used to camp there, so and fortunately the good thing about this is we've always got someone there camping and we don't have the vandalism in the domain. But we've gradually improved it. We've got a equestrian area, 2 cricket fields, which we don't have teams at the moment, but they're there if they're needed. We've got a BMX track of sorts there. But it's mainly used for the local community to walk their dogs. And I would just like the support of this committee to, that if we could maybe relocate another seat in the west area of the domain for people who walk their dogs in that area. It's quite a big area. And also we've had a request for some sort of goalpost for boys or girls to kick things through. And that's right, no Kirsten. And as well as that, we'd like to have exercise stations around, and that would be quite a bit of funding required for that. But that's basically why I've come here, just to get your support for these new things down there in the domain.
Thank you, Bernard. Do you have a priority order if we had some spare cash or money in our budgets?
I think the seats would be another seat. We do have a couple of seats in the domain, but yes. I'd like another one in the west area. If
we were able to provide it for you, we wouldn't be telling you where to put it. We'd want you to put it where you wanted to. So don't worry about that.
Yes. The domain's very well maintained there. It's maintained, and it's a really popular place for the community.
Yeah.
And I just think we'd like to keep improving it through the years.
Questions of Bernard? Paul?
Yeah. Some of the other places around our parks and reserves were the seats donated, and the people who donated have had a wee plaque with their name and donation. Is sort of that around the area, anybody that might be interested in doing that and giving a wee plaque with your name on it? And,
it's a very good idea. I was involved with the seat at the Memorial War Memorial, which input
I'm sure
would
we'll get a seat for them.
donated. But it would be something I could approach the community, see if anyone would be willing to. It would have to be done, of course, by the council,
Yeah.
you know, but with their jurisdiction, but it'd be quite a good idea, Kirsten, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I think the council will give a price more at and people just get the plaque that non-donated by and
I think that'd be a good idea.
Any other questions? Kirsten?
Just quickly, Bernard, obviously in windstorms we've got quite a few plants and everything and trees were knocked down. Is there any need for any more plantings in your custom area?
Several years ago we did a landscape plan for the whole area, and it's pretty well, I think we've pretty well got, you know, enough trees. It's just around where the pine trees were, used to be around the outside, we've struggled to get them to come away, so I think possibly we need some more replacements there. And it's quite a dry area and needs several trees that stand up to the winds as well.
All right, any other questions? There appears to be none. Thank you, Bernard, for coming along. It was a very succinct and very clear presentation. We know exactly what you're looking for and priority, so thank you. All right, there's no adjourned business. We now move to item 6.1, recommended speed limit changes, pages 18 to 114. Alice and Joanne? Yeah.
Hi everyone. So the purpose of this report is to update the board on the results from the recent speed limit consultation and obtain a recommendation for council. The consultation was carried out over a 3-week period and overall 297 submitters provided feedback. We also sought feedback from key stakeholders like the New Zealand Police, Whakakotahi and various other organisations. As you can see from the results, the majority favoured lower speeds in the Cuss area. However, mixed results were received for the Rangiora proposals. The recommendation in this report does include all of the speed limits proposed for Rangiora, and technical reasoning has been provided in section 4 as to why this is. The majority of the roads unfavoured by the public contain high-risk intersections, which with the reduction in posted speed limit will reduce the impacts of crash if one were to occur. The likes of Oxford Road and Johns Road 70 km/h zones also did not see favour with the public. However, due to development which has occurred and an increase in vehicle and turning movements, and also multimodal traffic in these areas, the speed limit is now unsafe. A reduction in speed limit along Seabridge Road was favoured, and therefore it is expected that the Taipui Utility Community Board will vote in support of a reduction to 80 km/h. As there is insufficient length to retain a 100 km/h speed limit on Claxton Road within its current bounds, without either encroaching on Seabridge Road or extending the 100 km/h zone into the current 80, it is recommended that this is reduced to 80. A reduction in speed limit was also not favoured on Marsh Road. However, with the current mean operating speed less than 40 km/h, a reduction to 60 will have little impact on the users of this road. We are recommending that the board adds in O'Rourke's Road between Oxford Road and Johns Road to the recommendation at a proposed speed of 80 km/h. Whilst not consulted on, the current mean operating speed along here is 63 km/h with an annual daily traffic count of 182 vehicles per day. The safe and appropriate speed for this road is 80 km/h. So the recommended option is to provide a recommendation with all the proposed speed limit reductions, including the addition of O'Rourke's Road. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Right. Questions? Morris?
O'Rourke's Road takes into account it's actually tar Sylvan shingle, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, it's only O'Rourke's Road between Swananoa Road and Johns Road, which is the sealed portion, and it's within the triangle of 80s which were already proposed, so that was one that we had missed. But it makes no sense at all to leave it at 100 because it's fully bounded by 80s around it.
I
So,
agree.
yeah, it's not the unsealed section to the south.
So that's Rorke's Road between Swananoe Road and Johns Road.
That's correct.
Thank you. Questions? Kirsten?
So, sorry, Joanne, on page 30, which has got cut, you've still got Mill Road and Earlys Road as 80. Is that being removed out of the process? That's what you stated. It wasn't put out of conversation.
I mean the map.
The map's got showing you the 80.
Yeah, so
That's been removed?
it hasn't been consulted.
No.
Yeah.
It's,
It's
not going
a
in.
proposal.
That's cool. And just going back to your table, where you've got roads which show obvious disfavour, shall we say, like some of them are getting up into the 60%. Fernside Road, for example, is 60% don't favour. It's going up to the proposed speed limit. Has there been significant accidents or crashes or anything to really mirror some of those areas that are not so favoured by the public?
Yes, and that's all taken into account when you calculate the safe and appropriate speed as well. It looks at the number of accidents and crashes that have occurred on the likes of Fernside Road and Blackstone Road. And Fernside Road is one that we actually do have some very regular accidents on. Not so long ago we had a ute hit a power pole. So it's a busy road, it's a very narrow road, and it's highly constrained by drains and structures such as power poles.
It's a rural road.
Yeah, it is, yeah, but it does make it quite a hazard, and it does mean that the safe and appropriate speed when calculated is definitely coming out at 80.
Okay. I have to admit that when I drive on these roads, they look like 100k roads to me, so I forget that they've gone down the speed limits in some of these portions already. How are you going to make it so that the environment actually looks like it needs to be an 80k road so that drivers respond appropriately?
Yes, I mean, it's always a challenge for us is how we remind people, and we need to do that with repeater signs at regular intervals. I think part of it is an education thing as well, so teaching people a little bit more about how we set speed limits and why we set them on certain roads at lower speeds and then have higher speeds, I guess, on other roads where there are more safety features. So that's part of it. I think as technology improves, we see more vehicles with the ability to be able to, with cameras, note what the speed limit is as people go past. So that's, I guess, a helpful tool. But a lot of people, obviously, their vehicles don't necessarily have that technology yet. So that's a changing and evolving, I guess, area.
Thank you, sorry, Mr. Chair. Just my final question is on Mount Thomas Road. Mount Thomas Road we put down to 80, and it's a very wide road with, although it's got some lifestyle on it, the houses are away from the road. How can you justify that going down to 80 when it doesn't have any of those accident constraints? It's not narrow. It's quite an easy road to drive 100 on.
So that section is just between Oxford Road and Johns Road, and I guess it's trying to get that consistent area where we have a consistent speed. So when we've gone through this process, we've really tried to think about trying to set boundaries in areas so that they are a little bit more understandable. And I guess that's just one that we had to look at and assess what we think the speed should be. Has assessed at a safe and appropriate speed of 80 and not 100.
So I ask again, how are you going to make that look like an 80k road when it's currently very easy to travel 100 on?
So again, we have to have our repeater signs. We need to make sure we are clear to people who are driving along it. It's visible what the speed they should be doing is on that road.
Paul.
person's stolen it, my thunder there. Same sort of thing as when you reduce these roads that physically they look like you should be able to do 100 k's on them, are you going to develop these roads that look like there should be an 80k road at the same time as reduce it, or are you just going to willingly reduce it and people won't know where they are in place? So to me, both ends working at the same time. You need to downgrade the road, you call it, if you want it to make people think that they're not still in 100k zone. There's lots of roads that don't look like it should be 80k or 50 road. They still look 80k road.
Yeah, I guess in this situation I wouldn't be anticipating downgrading the likes of Mount Thomas, because it would obviously mean narrowing it up and trying to, I guess, get the speed reduction that way. We can look at other physical things like road marking to try and narrow the lanes, as opposed to doing other work which is, I guess, more intense, such as removing seal, those sort of activities. And part of the process of changing these is that we do monitor them. We have to do speed counts 6 months after the speed limits have changed, and if we found there was an issue there, we would look at whether we needed to do some more to help reinforce that speed.
So it sort of answers my question is, and it's a bit tongue in cheek at the moment, but so if we have to actually make the road look like there are 80k roads, why are we changing from 100 to 80 if we actually have to actually prove to the public that they need to go down to 80k by doing these alterations and get the margins and all that going on? And I'm quite aware of how we get them down to that stage, but it's just, the cars are getting more modern, getting more safer. Is it more around driver education we need to look at?
So looking at Mount Thomas Road and the PDC tables, which are attached to the report, has a mean operating speed of between 70 and 74 kilometres per hour. So we're already seeing speeds of around here. We're not actually seeing a mean speed up and around 100. So setting in a speed of 80 kilometres is appropriate in that situation.
So you're saying it's not broken at the moment when it's only doing that speed?
There's two things. Sorry, setting the speed limit is one thing. And I guess we are moving more towards trying to better inform people what speeds are safe for a particular road. And we will see outliers in speed, we see that either way. But I guess this is helping to hopefully inform people of what is a safe and appropriate speed, and trying to reduce the severity of crashes if and when they are to occur. So that's the purpose of bringing these speeds down.
Joan.
I thoroughly welcome the reduction of speeds. Excuse me, on down to 80 on these rural roads that have a lot more traffic than they used to have. They're not as wide and they're not as
Have you got a question, Joan? You're
My
debating it
question
really.
is could we maybe confirm that this is the way to go?
I don't think Joan needs to. Jason.
Hi, sorry. So again, like Joan, I'm quite encouraged by the reduction in speed. I was just quickly going through the correspondence. Is there a requirement for you to factor in CO2 emissions when reducing speeds?
No, it's not part of the calculation at the moment.
That's just one of the nice to haves.
It's not something that we currently do as part of this setting the speed limit process, but I guess it is acknowledging that a reduction in speed will result in a reduction of carbon emissions. It's just not something that we've gone to yet in terms of a step to actually assess what that means.
Okay, thank you.
Monique?
My comment is just on Fernside Road. I thought maybe you would have gone 60k right up to Townsend Road, because it's such a busy area, Townsend Road feeding onto Fernside. I was sort of surprised it stopped further back, although I see obviously the public aren't very happy with the reduction in speed on Fernside Road, Side Road anyway. But is there any consideration to maybe reduce the speed on Townsend, because it's such a busy road now? I mean, people are using it, I think, as a way to go south from Rangiora. And then continuing with 60k Townsend and 60k on Fernside, that piece there. Is there any thought on that, or is it not there?
It's not something we've consulted on, and I think we would probably be struggling to justify 60. I think we would probably get a low level of compliance with that, so that wouldn't be a recommendation right now. I think if there was to be further development in that area and more use, then we would look at that again in the future.
Morris?
Joan, do you know a way of actually educating the people of the new speed limits would be actually paint the speed limit on the road? Because very few people look at stop signs a good ways, it seems. And it was actually on the road, actually, and a little bit more possibly.
Yep, it's definitely something that we are thinking about and using as a tool in some places. I think we were looking at that around the back of Ahoka Road past Silver Stream, and I think we've done that. The other thing we've done is paint red thresholds on the road where there is a speed limit change in some places. And again, that can just be a visual cue or a reminder for people that actually there's something different here that they need to be aware of. So there are different tools and tips in the toolbox that we can use very much like that. It's always one of those things, I guess, it's like the more you do it and it becomes normal, the more people get used to it, and then it can become a bit second-hand and ignored, so it's probably picking the right locations to do that.
Kirsten?
Jane, just this methodology, because these are rural roads, obviously we get tractors and contractors going very, very slow speed. Do you cut out the bottom portion of the speed counts because of those are probably more likely to be rural tractors and so on, rather than actual cars travelling on the road? But I'm frankly very surprised how low some of these figures are.
So they are the mean speed, which is recorded, so the middle, and there will be extremes at the top end where people are travelling really fast, and there will be some extremes at the bottom end. And I think, if we look at the curve, the majority will be sitting in the middle area there.
And when you place those areas, those speed markers, I noticed one, for example, on Mill Road was placed immediately after a one-lane bridge, which means that everybody was slowing down for the one-lane bridge before they actually started travelling. Who selects where those markers are actually placed to actually discover the accurate speed of the length of the road?
Yep, so in some situations we'll have multiple counts on a road. It may not just be in one location, and I think probably Giles Road down in Kaikoui was a really good example of this, where we had a speed limit on, I think it was on the state section, wasn't it, Ali, which was higher speed and not through the curve, but and we ended up having an extra count done to prove that actually, the speed, operating speed through that section was actually different from the other. So we aren't always just looking at one source of data. We do work with our traffic count contractor in try to make sure we do get counts in sensible places. So not where they are close to intersections. I'm a little bit surprised if we put one close to a one-lane bridge. Trying to put them in a location where the results aren't being skewed.
When I saw my house, it was just after a group.
Kirsten, I don't mean to interrupt, but you're talking away from your microphone. It's very hard to hear it distorts. Thank you. Duncan?
I realise that the speed zones are a national trend. I think something is probably being implemented by a national philosophy, but does the Waimea District Council bore the whole cost of this project, or?
So the funding for speed limits and speed limit change implementation is partly funded by NZTA, so 51% of that comes from NZTA, and the other 49% comes from the council budget. So that's all allowed for through our annual plan and long-term planning processes.
Thank you.
Right, it's time for someone going to move it. Just remember, whoever's moving it, to add in O'Rourke's Road between Swananoa Road and Johns Road. So, someone prepared to move? Joan moves, including O'Rourke's Road, seconded by Monique. Joan.
I know there's been a lot of work done on all these roads, and because we've got a lot of growth in our region and a lot more traffic on the roads, that we need to look at bringing down the speed limits closer to the urban areas. And I think what's happened is really appropriate.
Monique? No. Paul and then Kirsten.
Yeah, I'm caught between a difficult place here because coming to us en masse with all these numbers, I can't support, because there's some places here, these roads, is ridiculously slowing them down, while some of them need to be slowed down. So I can't support the way it's been presented here en masse because of that reason, and I think we need to we're trying to replace probably the worst drivers ever, and they're probably not going to slow down to these speeds anyway.
Right. Kirsten.
Yes, I'm in a similar position to Paul, because I think what we've got here is urban rules being applied to a rural road, and I think that's quite difficult to justify. There are certain roads here that have become predominantly urban, and they need to go down. But some of these roads are predominantly rural, and those roads you drive to the conditions. You should actually be driving on Foodside Road to the conditions, which means you can drive 100k quite safely if it's a good day and there's not much traffic on the road. So limiting people back to 80k when it's a totally rural outlook is not going to ensure compliance. The only way to do that is to change the way the road looks. Now, I voted accidentally, in a way, for River Road to go down to 50, thinking that would be sensible. But now every time I travel on River Road, I forget that it's 50 kilometres an hour, because the environment does not look like a 50 kilometre an hour road with a completely rural side. And we have had no funding from NZTA to be able to change that to look like an actual urban road. I do not agree that Fernside Road should go down to 80k. I do not agree that Mount Thomas Road should go down to 80k. And in fact, the roads in Fernside, all of them are predominantly rural with some lifestyle. None of those should go down past Plaskets Road to 80k. But I totally support roads such as Oxford Road, which have become urban and are seeing accidents and incidents happening on those roads. We can't keep using speed limits to try and explain why accidents are happening. That's not the reason. The reason that accidents are happening is we have no money to improve those intersections, and NZTA has recently slashed our budget. They have slashed one of our budgets in half from a very prudent, practical course of action to look after our roads that our roading team have spent hours and hours of work on, and we have half the money to spend on what we should. So if NZTA really want to make our roads safe, they've got to stop forcing us to make speed limits that are nonsensical in rural areas, and they need to give us some money to improve intersections. So I have to vote against this simply because I do not support some of the recommendations, and I do not support speed counts being done on roads that have tractors and very slow vehicles to bring the average down.
Well, very briefly, I'm going to support the recommendations. Like it or lump it, speed restrictions these days are becoming a norm. even a very wide, long, straight road looks safe, perfectly right for 100, but unfortunately people are killing people on these roads. And the only way that I can see to protect innocent people from death on our roads is to reduce the speed limits. I don't like them coming down, I have to say, but I think it makes all the sense in the world. Kirsten commented on River Road going from down to 50 and it should have been 60. Interestingly enough, the board members that were here would remember that the board did not want it to move below 60, and that was their recommendation to council, who overturned it. So don't blame the board, it was a little bit different. But I'm going to support it. Other speakers? Morris.
I'll be supporting it reluctantly like you, Jim, for the very reason that most of the time it's drivers at fault. It's got nothing to do with the roads. And this is really our only way to save lives. I mean, I like driving cars and I like driving cars fast. They don't exceed the speed limit. But I live on Oxford Road now, and when you go to turn into my driveway, people are reluctant to pass you, even if the road is clear. And they draw my attention to Thomas Road, Johns Road, Oxford Road. There's a number of houses along there that have gateways that have to turn into. And having a car coming behind you at 100 kilometres an hour, playing on their text phone, it's not good. So, I mean, I don't like so slow speed limits, but I think this is the way forward for we educate drivers, which will probably never happen.
Joan, right, a reply?
I sort of think of the Crescents Road issue, down to 80 k's, and the roads are narrow, and Mount Thomas Fernside Road's narrow as well. It's got a lot of traffic on it, and it's really narrow. And I think that 80 is quite reasonable and much safer with the volume of traffic that's on it now. And I do have to let you know that we're looking seriously, because even though we've been denied a lot of funding, that we're looking at fixing or widening the bridge on Lehman's Road, what is it they're called, the culvert? Townsend Road, because that's a death trap too. So and we would love to do roundabouts on that, but we'll be doing them as soon as we can. But in the meantime, I think it's really prudent that we bring that speed back on those arterial roads down to 80, because there's so much traffic and those roads aren't very wide.
All right, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary?
No.
Declare it carried.
Like my vote recorded.
Right.
Vote recorded?
Did you want yours recorded, and Andy? Andy Wells, yep. All right, next item, 6.2, pages 115 to 139. Shane.
You had me
You got
tonight
one?
rather than Shane.
I thought Shane had improved.
I gave him the evening off.
Thanks, Joanne.
So this report is regarding the intersection of Albert Street and High Street here in Rangiora, and is asking the board to consider whether to put in place a right turn restriction at the intersection. So this has been a request that has come through the board for the right turn to be banned at the intersection due to the delays that it at times causes. We have carried out some observations on site, and during the times that observations were carried out, the delays were around about 4 to 5 vehicles. Subsequent to this, we have also noted other occasions where they have been up to about 8. And we did note that sometimes this was in relation to the train going through on High Street, or also around the end of school time where there were a lot of children, or older children, high school students crossing at Albert Street. So there are 2 options included in the report for the board to consider. The first one is to retain the status quo and continue to monitor performance at the intersection. Or 3 options in the report. The 2 that we put in front of the board, the third option is to install a no right turn control sign at the intersection to encourage drivers not to turn right. Option 2, which would include some more substantial measures such as installing islands, we're not recommending at this stage. I'm happy to take any questions.
Right. Questions? Kirsten? Can you move the mic down a wee bit so you're talking to Kirsten, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Joanne, this area is a mess, to be frank, with traffic coming from Clyde Street and then traffic turning right and then traffic turning from Clyde Street as well. It gets incredibly messy and clogged up. Do you think putting the traffic island the way that it's demonstrated on 119 would help that or make it worse?
I would say that would make it worse at the moment, which is why we haven't recommended that option. So what we're recommending at this stage is that option is not progressed any further, that either option 1, which is to retain the status quo, or option 3, we need to install the signage, would be done first. And then we can continue to monitor, and if we felt like in the future that was required, we could come back to the board and it would need to be added into a future program.
Paul?
Oh,
well, I was just looking for questions. Monique, I'll come back to you.
Have there been any accidents there? I'm just curious. Do you know if there's been any accidents of cars turning right onto High Street from Cones Road? Yes.
I'm not aware of this being driven from an accident perspective. My understanding was more to do with the delays it was causing for vehicles coming out of Albert Street. So no, I'm not aware of an accident history.
Paul?
Yeah, I'd like to move A and C.
Moved by Paul. I'll second it from here then. Paul?
Yeah, why I think it's important not to have a right turn there is predominantly there's not a lot of people turning right there for the start, but some of the people there, when they actually sit there to turn right, we've got a St John ambulance for an ambulance there, and sometimes an ambulance has to come out of that and turn left. They can't turn because there's an island there, and they're sitting there waiting for the ambulance, and the ambulance can't get through. It also affects, because it's such a short distance from the set of lights, sometimes the people wanting to turn right there are sitting there and they miss that set of lights because there's a lot of traffic down Kippenberger Avenue, which tends to back up all the people down Alfred Street quite regular, and they get cheesed off. So that's, well, it's very important, and I don't support putting the islands in there at all. It's just trying to educate, and that's a big word these days, educating people they shouldn't be turning right, and it's just common sense in my books.
Is that when the ambulance can't turn right?
The ambulance goes out the other way and goes that way.
Okay. I seconded it because, interestingly enough, I raised this at a board meeting 3 or 4 months ago that was a corner for an accident waiting to happen. And I raised it at that meeting because I'd come out of a meeting at the hall there, and people backing out there are in a hurry. They see the lights are all right the other way, so then they see some cars coming and they just think, I'll beat that car. And if anyone was coming the other way, it was just always to me a dangerous situation. So I certainly support this, I think, from a road safety. And also I think the monitoring is a good idea. Other speakers? Kirsten?
Yeah, I certainly support this, but obviously once you've got something in, it does sometimes have an impact on other things. So I guess the only concern I have is for those people who pull out of the War Memorial car parks. It's going to be very difficult for them to turn around and go back the other direction. They'll have to turn left, and then they'll probably end up using Cones Road as a rat run. So there could be some consequences from this. But as you see, the numbers are very slow. I think it's worth a go. I certainly think that anyone else past the warming route can certainly go the other way. And I do agree with the blocking of the road for the ambulance. I think that's quite a critical thing, that road needs to be free. It's already very busy, and it's not going to get any quieter with the growth that we've seen in the east of the district.
Other speakers? There's nothing to reply to, Paul. So I'll put that. All those in favour, please.
Like reply, I'm just going to mention what Jones said about the ambulance. The exit ambulance doesn't go to Nightmare anyway, it goes through that between the cities and Tunes left there, so it doesn't affect the ambulance side because it doesn't turn right off of Alfred Street because it comes another set of lights.
Yeah,
as
but
well,
you
so
can't bring it into a road
exit
reply.
way.
Thank you. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Item 6.3, pages 140, 145, Coldstream Tennis Club. Andy, welcome.
Hello everybody. The purpose of my report today is to bring to you approval to place a temporary accommodation for Coldstream Tennis Club on the existing building platform at the newly constructed 10 tennis courts on Coldstream Road. This is largely to give Coldstream Tennis Club time to get their building correctly designed, consented and constructed. The proposal is for this temporary accommodation to be in position for no longer than 1 year. It is expected to have no financial impact on the council budgets and is not going to impact the wider community. As background to this, the Coldstream Tennis Club have had their current design estimated, and currently it is exceeding their initial budgets that they have. They have revised their design and they are now getting that repriced, but the result of that is a slight delay in terms of getting their clubhouse up and running. The intention for the temporary clubhouse is not a temporary clubhouse. It is deemed as a storage facility to allow them to commence, to get their operations up and running, which they would like to do in this tennis club season. It is the staff recommendation that this should not really impact the community in a great way. It is possibly a benefit to them in terms of allowing their junior clubs to get going and start working on them. They're currently using the old Rangiora tennis court club at the moment, and it is quite small now that we've had an amalgamation of 2 clubs. I'll take it that the report is read, but I will take questions. It's quite a straightforward decision.
Paul.
Yeah, I noticed you mentioned the function used as storage, not as a club room.
Yep, the intention is, because as soon as you put a container on a building platform, we obviously have legislation that requires building code. If we apply any services to that, then obviously they have to run through a consent process. So by not putting services and it being deemed a storage facility and a welfare space, we can keep it to a minimum. They're not constrained by consent, but also we can constrain its timeline.
I just noticed there it's got 3 big double wrap slides on the proposed container.
It is. What it is they have, there was a...
Paul, could you turn yours off, please?
Staff have received a letter. Daniel Smith Industries have donated this container, so it was a previous container for something else during the quakes as a temporary container. He has offered to give it to them for the period of time that they need it. So it does look very permanent, but it's our recommendation to restrict them to a year by adding it potentially to the heads of terms. It's a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut, but it will maintain that. It is sort of our concern that we don't want it to become a temp to perm solution. So by doing that, we can probably restrict it and we can monitor it to make sure that it does occur.
Any other questions, Joan?
I'd like to move.
No, I'll just see if there are any other questions first. Any other questions? Joan?
Thank you. Very nice that Daniel Smith has donated this, and I do understand that...
Excuse me, could you turn yours off, please?
I do understand that they have about $830,000 in kitty, so they're just readjusting their building to fit their budget, and it will be all go, and I think it's important that we assist them so they can get underway this year.
We haven't got it seconded.
I was going to second it.
Thank you, Kirsten. Joan was in a hurry. Like the enthusiasm. Right, Kirsten.
No, nothing to add.
Anyone else want to add? Paul?
Yeah, I will be supporting this. I just was really concerned with the windows and how storage here would possibly look like an extra place for theft and all that drama, with no powers and no burglar alarm systems and all that type of drama. Where a completely enclosed container might be a lot more secure than running with glass and everything on it. That was my main concern on it. So, and I know Dan's got plenty of other containers that you probably didn't have one without the windows on it. Just the security of where it's situated and vandalism and all that drama, that's my concern.
We were somewhat torn in terms of what we wanted to get onto that space. Yes, you're right in terms of the security of a container, but then on the flip side of it, we were concerned with having constructed a very nice architecturally designed building just across the way to then start to progress and put just a straightforward container on there was a little bit... We were caught between a rock and a hard place on that, and that was the decision that we thought was probably best. And but on the flip side of it, we've asked them to redecorate it so it doesn't have lots of sign writing about eggs and things on the side of it. And we've asked them to put some extra planting around it just so we can try and soften its appearance, because there's generally not a taste to put containers back in from days gone by. So that was largely us driving that to make it sort of a bit more aesthetically pleasing. But as Joan mentioned, I've had some feedback from the club in the last few days that they've now engaged an architect to do the concept designs, so they're back on it. So there is more of a drive to actually get this clubhouse up and going and running. So I'm quite confident that this is actually only ever going to be a temporary solution for them.
Right, anybody else? I don't think you got anything to reply for, Joan. So I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. The contrary, carried. Bernard, you're free to leave at any time you want to. It's not compulsory. You're doing really well. Thank you. Item 6.4, pages 146 to 149, meeting schedule. Kay. Just before Kay starts, you can now take your masks off if you like. That was dropping a hint that he might like to leave.
Get out. Just got to make sure he can get out. I'm not sitting it on.
Good evening, everyone. This is a report that you get most end of years, just setting your meeting schedule for the following year. We've kept the same time and place and date, and I would be very surprised if somebody changed anything at this point, but I'm open to you dropping the time to 6 if you like, but other than that, I'll take the report as read.
I think we don't like. Any questions? Someone prepared to move? Jason moves, Andy seconds. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, I think it speaks for itself.
Well done. Anyone else? I put that. All those in favour, please say aye. The contrary carried. Item 7.1 is procedural, just to receive the report for the submissions. I'll move its adoption. A seconder for that. Duncan, put that. All those in favour, please say aye. I'll move the chair's report. Duncan seconds it. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Item 9 through to 9.7, and then you note the public excluded part 9.8, and there's a recommendation there. Is someone prepared to move that? Moved by Paul, seconded by Duncan. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Members' information exchange. Where will we start? Andy.
Nothing to report.
So good choice by the chair, wasn't it?
It feels like it was only 2 weeks ago that I was here last time. So.
Right, Joan.
We've been really, really busy. Of course, Three Waters has been consuming us lots, but I can't report. There's things underway, but Jim, you might say what we can say and what we can't say.
You can say anything that wasn't dealt with in committee. And we won't know if it was.
All I probably should say is that we're underway this week, and we'll know more next week, with the procedures that we're underway to fight this Three Waters reform with the government. So we're one of the leading councils, we're leading the way, we're very determined that this reform is unjust, it's undemocratic, and it's the survival, in my opinion, it's the survival of our district and our council and our ability to give great service to our community like we do now is really threatened, and I feel personally that this reform makes me very worried and very scared, like I've never been before, about the future of our district. So, but there'll be more to be heard later. So, but anyway, local government conference, Paul and I, did you go, Paul? Yes, you did. No, you didn't. I did. Went to the
Let's least you know.
Conference, Zone 5 and 6 meeting in Christchurch. I attended with some councillors. It was, yes, we had local government New Zealand there, we had DIA there, we all listened silently and too scared to say anything, but none of us really agreed with what they were trying to tell us, but so that was interesting, I guess, but not very rewarding as far as I was concerned, but something that we need to go through. Rangiora Airfield Advisory meetings, we've had those, we're getting on with new leases at the airfield, so we're trying to make that happen. We have had special meetings on Three Waters, a meeting with some of our councillors last Friday with 2 Labour MPs, Angus Webb and Sarah Pallett, trying to tell them our concerns and voicing our concerns and letting them know where we're at, where we come from. It was, they listened, but yes, anyway, you have to try, don't you? And then we've been having council management workshops with senior managers the last couple of weeks. I'm looking forward for the next year. So it's been it's very busy and long days, some days on Tuesdays. But anyway, that's me.
I think, Joan, that the board would say thank you to the councillors for the work they're doing on Three Waters. I think this council's been absolutely magnificent from what I have observed to date. There were just a couple of little things I could add. There was a delegation, you might find it interesting, the delegation sent down from Wellington to have a look at rural schemes. I gave the article to the mayor, so you probably know this. There were 5 women that came down to look at the rural schemes and get it, and they went to Otago. And you all know rural schemes are circulated, the water gets on the scheme to the highest point and then comes down by gravity feed, usually from the tank. And you know, they went up this quite steep property, and they had all the schemes explained to them. And then the leader from Wellington, the lady, said, "How do you get the tanker up this steep track?" That's how much knowledge that they've got. Absolutely unbelievable.
No.
So just this is what you guys are dealing with. Jason.
Nothing too crazy this month, just 2 meetings to report on. So we had a meeting with the Custer Community Centre, There was ongoing issues with vandalism, so they're currently looking at hopefully getting some cameras installed, maybe. And they're hopefully going to be getting their floors done in their main area done very soon. And the fire brigade is preparing for its 150th in 4 years' time.
Duncan.
I attended this Southport Safety Traffic Project meeting here on your behalf. Your board's briefing on the 27th, and last week we had submissions to the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. Murray.
Well, Duncan was there with me. I went to the Central Drainage Committee's meeting. I wonder how long that's going to survive under Three Waters too. And I went up to Charles Upham Village and met with a lot of residents, and there was more opinions about parking than hot dinners up there. I think the real problem is that village has been built without enough room for staff to park off the road. That's the real problem with it. The residents at Ashley are somewhat concerned over speeding in the village because there's a lot of new younger people moved in there, and those roads over there, some of you will be well aware, there's no footpaths. So the children play on the road, the people walk up and down the road, everybody walks up and down the road. Suddenly to be confronted by a car doing 100 plus Ks is a bit of a problem. It seems to be aggravated by the fact that the railways have done up the rail crossing. They spent a couple of weeks doing that up and put new sleepers at Newtown Steel. I went to the All Board briefing, and the other thing I've noticed is a lot of mention about parking I've seen going backwards and forwards. One of the problems seems to be that on Saturday we get a lot of cars parked.
Excuse me, Murray, could you turn your mic on?
Oh, sorry.
This is meant to be streaming so everyone can hear your wisdom.
Yeah, there seems to be a problem with people bringing empty trailers into the town and taking up some of the parking spaces. I noticed at one stage in the main street there was a 10-room trailer and a car taking up 2.5 spaces and had nothing on the trailer at all. I've done a bit of research on it and I've found out a lot of people are bringing their rubbish dump and then doing their shopping on the way home. I don't know how we'll get around this, but maybe it's worth sort of an article about it. And yeah, the other problem was that there's a bit of a problem with a track that runs through Green Street from Southbrook Road to all the residential houses above it, and it's grass. It's never been turned into an all-weather track, and several of the people who live down there have been on to me about the fact that it's not really satisfactory in winter. So I actually went to the trouble of walking through it myself, and it goes a hell of a long way, that track, and it goes off in several different directions. So I'm wondering if perhaps it's something that we should look at. Because we have done shingle paths in other areas, but that one's all grass.
Can you give the exact areas to Kay at the end of the meeting so staff can have a look at that?
Yeah, I have mentioned it before, but and the other problem I had is that the natives are complaining about speeding in South Belt, not because I live there either, but one of them down the road had an up and down with the contractor where he nearly had an accident, and the problem is that the contractor came up with this wonderful story that because it was rural on one side, he could do anything he liked down there. So I've spoken to the roading engineer, and she's going to put some 50k signs up there to try and slow them down. So that's all I've done.
Thanks. Mary, Kirsten.
Yes, Jones covered Three Waters, so the only other big piece of legislation that hit us like a
Murray, okay.
hit us like a mallet out of nowhere was the intensification of housing. We had no warning of that, and that will have some direct implications on our district plan and how we deal with that in the near future. If we look at some of the central government legislation that they're expecting to put through in the next year or two, it's incredibly busy, and so we actually have no idea whether the timeframe is going to be able to be met. So that means at the moment we have to treat it like it's just the bill, it's not law, and basically continue with business as usual, with hoping that we can get our district plan through and through the process without then having to change an entire chunk of our residential density chapters and everything that's related to that because of this new proposal. So though, for any of those of you who haven't heard about it, it's talking about less controls, building controls in the medium density, the town centre residential areas, which used to be RS1, which means they can go up to 3 stories high, they can have up to 50% site coverage, and there's a lot less restriction on how much impact that has on their neighbours, and there is no resource consent process that goes with that. So that is quite significant, particularly for provincial towns who aren't used to intensification of that nature. So that's another little piece of joy that's been spread amongst us to work on going forward, as well as the RMA changes and the changes to the purpose of local government.
Thanks, Kirsten. Monique.
A WAG, Waimakariri Access Group, had a meeting here on Tuesday in Rangiora, and some of the council, attended by 10 council staff who did a walk through Rangiora or in wheelchairs or limited visibility, etc. And it's quite a good experience, I think, for some of them were staff who work on footpaths, etc., and to just improve their awareness of how, footpath, the way width, etc., and walkways onto the roads, how important it is to make them as accessible as possible for people. So it was a good little meeting. It would be cool.
Duncan, you had a question.
I had a question for Kirsten.
Go back. I wondered what the funny noise was.
Have you been given any indication regarding obviously the high density type housing project, thing? Is that liable to be in zones, or if you lived in West Belgium and had a vacant section next to you, would you be afraid?
No, it's only in what is called the medium density, which is what we've known as Res 1, whereas West Belt are all Res 2. So it's predominantly affecting that central part of each town in the medium, as far as I'm aware. That's what I would say. So it's designed for the cities, to be frank. It's really not designed for provincial towns. But it will override all of our design controls that we have for building, except there is still some setback. The staff are going through the detail now to try and work out which rules are going to have to change if that becomes law. But at the moment, as we've said, because there's not enough detail, we really have to just keep going business as usual with our operative plan and keep progressing the submissions from the new.
I think there might be an intention for once the staff have worked out exactly all the implications, that they'll come and brief you more specifically about what those changes are, because it will have quite a significant impact, as Kirsten said.
Yeah. But not in East Belt or West Belt.
Thank you. Thank you. Morris.
I just attended 3 meetings, a Central District Drainage meeting, District Plan meeting, and All Wards briefing.
Thank you, Morris. Paul.
Yes, just to follow on from what the chairman was saying about the amount of knowledge some of our local government ministers know about Three Waters. I actually attended a meeting with Minister Mahuta in Oxford for one of Oxford's small wells. And while she was looking around, she said, "Well, this feeds the whole of Waimakariri." And she actually seriously thought this wee tiny well would feed the whole of Waimakariri. So let's just see how out of touch they are with the water scenarios and their own progress. But anyway, Three Waters is happening, and it's a real worry. We've been working a lot of time on it. I think there's a scarier thing coming, and that's local government reforms. And I think the Three Waters is just the start of possibly the end of some councils around New Zealand as it's looking. So most of them. Yeah, most of them. The whisper out there, they want 14 councils out of the total of 68 or something, 67 at the moment. And that's a real worry if they take some of the big duties, the localism out of council. So I think that's a real worry. Just to add on to what Kirsten was saying about local RMAs and what have you. I think one of the worst things they are is they're taking away the needs for any car parks. If you build a house or one of those 3-storey buildings there, you don't have to have a car park whatsoever on your property. So where are people going to put the parks? That's going to call back onto councils. Yeah, well, they're not even going to have any car parks whatsoever on any properties. So that's a wee bit of a worry. There's concern, as everybody knows, of funding for roading. The land transport's cut basically $6 million out of our budgets, and it's a real worry what we're going to do in the future, because we just seem to be spending their monies on other things that, to me, doesn't make sense, and taking away from the maintenance and the hardcore business what council need to do and are expected to do. And that's the worst thing, we're expected to do it, and our council passes the budget, goes to land transport, and we've got the money put aside for it, their 50%, or 51% are normally paid. They just take a big extra and cut it and say we haven't got the money to do it, and yet everybody in here knows what they spend money on.
I suspect a lot they're being told to redirect that to the new rail line to the Auckland airport. It mightn't be their fault.
Possibly too. Well, being involved a wee bit with the airport, we've got some safety concerns there with gates being left open and cars driving on the airfield, and so that's a pretty important thing to get sorted out in that area. But the biggest thing I want to bring out to you, on the 28th of November at 1:15, our local cadet units have got a parade in front of the building here, and they're going to change the name to number 88 Rangiora-Ashley Air Training Course. And that's a lot of the young people around the district. And no doubt Joan will back... Waimakariri, yeah.
88 Squadron Waimakariri. There's Air Training Corps, and there's 70 children, 13 to 19, training at the airfield.
Yeah, so as I say, Joan will back me up on it. They're doing a wonderful job out there with some of the young children around the area, and I've been blown away by some of the atmosphere of the place when you go there, and the quality the kids are producing there. So I've thoroughly endorsed everybody in this room to go to that. It's the 28th of November at 1:15, or they put it 13.15 hours. 1:15. And you know, I just think it's going to be such a good thing, and we need to go there and support them in every way we can. So it's a really big thing for our district with this training, and no doubt, I actually thought Joan would have brought it up, but we've been so busy with everything else, but that was an important thing to bring up, I thought.
Right, thank you. Moving on, item 11 is for your information. Item 12 is for, and 12.1, 12.2 for your information. I can't help but think maybe if you're agreeable, I could talk to the green space people. We've had a delegation from Bernard, and he's not asking for much. I noted we carried over 1,580 in the general landscape budget last year. That would put a nice chair up there, seat, wouldn't it? I could just ask them to bring a little report to us, and we can consider it then, if you're happy. Yes, Kay.
We are getting a report on landscape budgeting in the next month or two, so I'll just tell Grant to add that in.
Just mention that. If the board to have a preliminary look without committing ourselves just seemed sensible to me, because we do plenty. Right, so there are no media items, there are no questions, there's no urgent general business, so that brings us to the end of the meeting itself.